Good evening, everybody, and I'd just like to welcome you to this formal meeting of the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee, held in part by Microsoft Teams. Please note that this meeting of the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee is being live streamed and will be recorded by the Council to support the production of the minutes for use for democratic services. To ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited by the Chair. Mute your microphone when you are not talking. If accessing via Teams only, always turn on your video function when invited to speak and state your name. Please use your microphone when speaking, and please mute or turn off your microphone when you're not talking. If you would like to speak on an item, please do so by raising your hand. If you're in the room, you could raise your hand in person. If you're on Teams, raise it on Teams, and I'll try to keep an eye on the order. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm should sound, please exit the building by the way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the ground floor of the multi-storey car park. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you. Before we start the agenda properly tonight, I would just like to take a moment to remember Councillor Nick Geary, who sadly passed away earlier this month. Nick was a member of the BCP Children's Overview and Scrutiny since the first meeting back in July 2019. And I know that he's been representing his community for a lot longer than that. He attended our meetings regularly until his health started to fail. I would like to send our thoughts and condolences to his friends and family of all the members of the committee. Councillor Cooper, maybe you'd like to say something as well.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, I knew Nick for probably 30 odd years, and he was a very good ward councillor. He was Mayor of Christchurch twice. He'll be sadly missed, and what you've just said, pass on the condolences to him and his wife and family, and yeah, he will be sorely missed. Thank you.
Thank you for those words. I think as a matter of respect, I think we shall have a stand for a 2-minute silence. Everybody. Moving on to agenda item 1, apologies. I know there's been apologies from Mark Saxby and Peter Martin. Can I just check, Louise, have there been any others since?
No other apologies, Chair.
Okay, in that case, I believe we have no substitute members. Declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interest or any local interest on any items on the agenda? Okay, I'll just also add to that, you all failed the test there. The agenda was in slightly the wrong order, so we did it the right way round there. Minutes. Let's confirm the minutes of the last meeting. Does anybody have any issues with the previous minutes? No, in that case, I shall sign them here. The first time for a while, sign them properly in person, sorry. Looking at the action sheet is a few things on it which we progressed with recently. There's a link to the member of the Young People's Parliament. The link is now on the BCP website. That was holding over from sort of last year, but it's there now, and I believe it's working. The chair sending thanks on behalf of the committee to Children's Services. It went out in the newsletter shortly after our meeting, actually. March 22 this year, the chair liaised with the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Board regarding scrutiny of the high needs block funding. Now we have an item on tonight's agenda which sort of overlaps with this, and of course the Scrutiny Board is changed. So what I intend to do is we'll see how tonight's goes, and then I'll get in touch with the chair of the board will be now, which the new committee anyway, and talk to them after we had our meeting tonight. And in June this year, Community Safeguarding Partnership is on the forward plan for the corporate and community in December. So we talked about having representation or talking to that committee. So I'll write to the chair and ask for an invite for myself and possibly another member of the committee to attend. Or volunteer, but I've got a feeling I know that the person who might want to volunteer on that because it's their particular topic. But we shall see. In December. It's in December. Note that the feedback from the Ofsted monitoring was on the agenda for tonight, but because we had the whole councillor feedback, which I know a number of you attended, it was a briefing meeting, that covered that. And I do believe that the plan is to have those meetings for each of the Ofsted monitoring visits. So rather than coming to us, it's going to be shared with all councillors if we're happy with that. And then we get to see it, and then anybody else who's interested. There was quite lots of questions from members who aren't on the committee at that meeting, which was good to see. Does anybody else have any issues with any other items there? No? Okay. I believe there's no public issues.
No, Chair.
We're on to agenda item 6, the Send Improvement Journey theme, permanent and fixed terms exclusions. This is page 23 to 26 on our agenda. So this item is a continuation of our monitoring of the Send Improvement Journey. Just to remind, our committee agreed that the best way to proceed with this is to have a series of themed items coming to the committee. Today we're looking at permanent and fixed terms exclusions. I'd like to welcome Sarah Rempel, Director of Education and Skills, to present the report. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Evening, Chair. Evening, everybody. I'm actually going to hand over to Kelly Tutchin, who is head of the virtual school and interim service manager for the inclusion team, and as such leads on the exclusions. So it is a brief report, so we're happy to take any questions or indeed follow up afterwards if needed. Kelly?
Thanks, Sarah. Evening, everybody. As Sarah said, my name's Kelly Twitchin. I'm the service manager for the inclusion team, and permanent exclusions is certainly something that we're working to reduce. The BCP Children's Services are working collectively to reduce the number of permanent exclusions for all children. This report pertains to those children who have an education healthcare plan or those that are under SEND support within schools. And you'll notice that there is an increase in exclusions, permanent exclusions, from the report that's been presented to you. So I'm going to assume that you've all read the report. It's quite short, it's quite brief. Really, it's to bring to your attention some of the actions that we are putting in place in order to reduce the number. So we have an offer from the virtual school for all schools within BCP for free trauma and attachment training. This training will support schools with social emotional behaviours that they are often seeing within their schools, and that can more often than not lead to exclusions, either those being suspensions, which previously known as fixed term exclusions, or permanent exclusions. So this offer is open to all our schools, and we're encouraging them to take it up. I'd also bring your attention to the action. So we have regarding a specific team within the inclusion service. We now have a team dedicated to reducing the number of permanent exclusions and looking at our alternative provision across the BCP area. This team will be able to monitor data, challenge schools where necessary, but also ensure that there is support for them as well, and bring together professionals to work in a multi-agency fashion to again look at where the needs are and where the support is needed to prevent permanent exclusions and reduce the numbers in total. And finally, we are looking, well, we have started, in fact, an audit of our alternative provision. Meetings are taking place and will continue to take place on a fortnightly basis, looking at what alternative education provision is within the BCP area, what is needed, how we can work with existing providers to ensure that we would begin to reduce numbers, provide outreach services to our schools, again to look at needs, trying to keep our young people in schools rather than removing them from schools, and in the worst case scenario, them being permanently excluded. So for me, they're the main parts of the report. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them or take them at a later date.
Right, thank you very much for that. If I can just sort of kick off with a few questions to get the ball rolling. So looking at, well, first off, just correct me if I'm wrong, we've now gone back to the terminology of suspension and permanent exclusion, because we seem to have gone through permanent and temporary exclusion for a while and then come back to that. So if a pupil is temporary or suspended, try to get the terminology right now, so if pupil is suspended on a number of times in a year, there's a maximum number of times or number of days that they can be suspended. I think it works out, it's quite large, like 24% of the school year.
45 days. It's 45 days. There is nothing legally to say that they need to be permanently excluded at that point. But I think if it got to that point where a young person was suspended for that number of days across the school year, we would be looking to work with school, because there is clearly issues that we need to resolve with the school. So we would be expecting schools to come back to us and talk to us before it got to a permanent exclusion.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, because you sort of answered part of my question before I've asked it. So yeah, 24% is quite a lot of the school year, and therefore you would expect. Do you know, does it happen? Do pupils get to that point and end up being permanently excluded due to stacking up suspensions, or is it just sort of something which never actually really happens?
I have seen it once. So that's the only time I've said.
it-
So I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it rarely happens, because if, as I say, schools will look to contact us and request support before you get to that point.
And can you tell me, is there any monitoring or research being undertaken to the reasons for exclusions in school? Is there a track of the reasons and the reasons at different schools that pupils get excluded?
So we do monitor the reasons for exclusion, and we do monitor which schools are permanently excluding young people, both for SEND and the wider cohort of young people across BCP. Yes.
And can I ask what happens to that monitoring research? Is that shared with schools in any way?
So this is why we've developed a specific team, so that we can go back and challenge schools with the data. We have in the past not supported and challenged our schools as much as we would have liked to. So by having this data, by having resource in terms of a team to look at this data, we can now go back to our head teachers, go back to our schools and begin conversations about it.
Going to pause a minute to see whether anybody else wants to. Sarah, thank you.
So this is obviously a really important thing, and I completely agree with it because I have obviously personal experience with permanent exclusions with children with disorders and stuff. But how do you plan on overcoming the prevalent issue of children being distracted by these students?
So there's a lot of work that schools do in order to work with the children within their school. It's really important that young people are made to feel safe in the school that they attend, and so the offer that I talked about in terms of training is open to all our schools, and that's what I'm really encouraging our schools to take on board. Like you say, there's two sides to everything. And we need to look at not only supporting the young people that are struggling in terms of maybe social emotional issues, possibly mental health, but we also need to look at how that impacts on the children that are already in the classroom. We need to work with schools because that's where the resource is and that's where the expertise are. So it's about upskilling our schools, upskilling our teachers, to find ways to support both of those young people, both those that are all left in the classroom and those that may have been permanently excluded, or that whilst they're still in school, supporting that young person's needs to prevent the permanent exclusion and then therefore to prevent the disruption of the other young people in the classroom. There's no set answer and there's no magic wand. But we do want to work with our schools to improve the quality of education that all our young people get in the classroom, to make sure that they all feel safe.
Do you want to follow up that at all? Yeah, okay, right. So I'm just going to say I seem I'm coming over a bit quiet on YouTube, so I'm going to just pump up my volume slightly. So apologies to people in the room if I'm shouting at you. Yes, of course you can. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I was just looking at Action H, setting up BCP Head Teachers Forum, and I've just noted down here, like, how would you go about incorporating United Learning and an independent academy chain, so like Twine and Learning, into that kind of BCP Head Teachers Forum? I know it's sometimes quite difficult to incorporate those academy chains into it, but I was just wondering how you would go about that.
So yeah, I can come in there, Dylan. So this is something that we're going to be setting up. Hopefully, it'll be in place for the autumn term. We would like all schools and all multi-academy trusts to be represented within that head teachers forum. I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think it's something that heads will want to take part in, because we will be discussing important issues that affect all schools. For example, in year fair access policies, BCP's approach to school attendance orders. That's just a few things that have sort of been on my agenda the last couple of weeks. And it's also it will also be a really good place for people to take issues, for example, like school uniform policies and things like that, in front of the head teachers forum. So I don't think we're going to get people not wanting to join it. I think it's going to be a really good space for our BCP head teachers and MAT leaders to join together and to discuss those really important issues.
Would you like to follow that up?
Just saying about the about that uniform policy. Do you reckon that's something that I could get in with the head teachers?
That was my thoughts about the forum to address it at.
Cool,
It's
thank
certainly
you.
to have all the head teachers and MAT leaders in one space.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Does anybody? Yes, Sandra.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question is actually about, well, it's not a question, it's a comment more than anything else, about alternative provision. Actually refers to the audit and review of alternative provision. Some time ago, I did recommend some premises which I thought would be suitable. I know someone came to look at them, but nothing further happened. And I thought maybe because of this review, perhaps this could be investigated further, as you clearly need more alternative provision and these premises are still available.
Yes, please. If we can get together offline, Councillor Moore, that would be great.
Okay, you're happy with that, Sandra? Yep. Are there anybody else? Yep, May.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to refer to the table in paragraph 8, particularly the line that says send support and number of pupils with 1 or more suspension. So just in general, that number is quite high. It's a percentage of pupils that are actually suspended, but it has increased as a percentage in 2021 to date. So I'm wondering whether we know why, and also what is being done to actually help the pupils that fall into that bracket. And then the other question I have, Chair, is probably an easy one to answer. Paragraph 11 in actions, bullet point M. What is a navigator? It says providing all schools with a navigator, and I was just wondering what a navigator or who a navigator is. Thank you, Chair.
Ellie, do you want to come in on both of those?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. So a navigator, we have pulled together a pilot scheme that's known as Team Around the School, and the scheme involves navigators, and these are members of the BCP team who are based within schools. They work alongside schools, but also alongside young people and their families for a number of reasons. One of their biggest targets is to reduce the number of inappropriate referrals into social care. And then after that, very much around prevention of permanent exclusions and suspensions, improving attendance. And the navigators are devising programs and training for families that are bespoke to that family and bespoke to those young people and their families' needs. It's been really well received by our schools. It's quite heavily resourced, but it has been positive. We are constantly reviewing the data that comes from that. and whether or not it's having the impact that we would like it to have. But there is direct work with families and young people. So that's essentially what they are. They're BCP staff working within the schools to deliver various programs to our families. In terms of the number of young people with suspensions, nationally there's been an increase with permanent exclusions and suspensions, certainly after lockdown and after COVID. We are seeing an increase in behaviours that are linked to anxiety, which we know as a local authority we need to support our schools with, and we are working with our EP team to devise an offer specifically for this area in terms of anxiety and emotional school-based avoidance. The suspensions for young people with SEND, we're very much working again with our SEND colleagues and with schools to ensure that schools are identifying early enough any special educational needs, and when they are concerned about behaviours, the number of suspensions potentially, or if they feel that maybe they are not able to meet all the needs of the young person, that they call an early annual review. So we're very much signposting schools back to the SEND team to have discussions and make sure that communication is really clear about what the needs of the child are.
Thank you. Do you want to come supplementary, Blake?
Yes, Chair, if I may. I just wanted to have a supplementary on the navigator. So just wanting to understand whether this is a separate service to, say, for example, a caseworker. So if the child or the family has a social care caseworker, do they work alongside each other? How does that, what's that interaction there?
So there is, so those navigators are BCP members of staff. They're aware of lead professionals in children and families' lives, and they would then, yes, speak to, if a child was open to social care, that navigator would talk to the social worker. So there is a joined up approach. They would, if a young person had an EHCP, they may well talk to the SEND officer. It's about very much about bringing all professionals together around the young person, with that person that's sort of holding them all together being the navigator.
Thank you for that. Sarah, did I see that you indicated to speak just then? No, sorry, I just must have been seeing things then. May, are you okay with that? Anybody else got any?
I would like to draw everyone's attention to item C. Obviously, this is imperative to just improvement in general, but how are we planning on making schools want to take these programs and training? Because of course they are free, but they aren't going to be mandatory. So how are we going to encourage them to take these in order to actually start improving?
You're absolutely right. That's a very good point. Schools want to understand our young people, and there is a desire to learn more and more. Teachers tend to be people that do want to continue learning. So there is always a desire from that side of things. Often I find if something is free, they're more likely to take it up, which is why I've made it free. It isn't mandatory, and I don't think we could ever find a way to make it mandatory. What we have looked at is working with our teaching schools to look at the trauma and attachment training that's newly qualified and SCIT students receive in their teacher training programs. And that's something that as a virtual school we are looking at to try and become part of, and try to become part of that delivery within their teacher training programs. We've also spoken with Bournemouth University around having some training with their social work degree as well. So it's about finding every opportunity that we can. Sometimes you need to offer a bit of a carrot, even if that's only in the form of cake, I find.
And sorry, Kelly, you should mention your conference as well in October, November.
So the virtual school are holding their first BCP conference in November, where our theme will very much be around trauma and attachment. And we have some quite well-known keynote speakers, one of which is a lady called Louise Bomber, who's very well known in the teaching profession, certainly around trauma and attachment. So it's just about finding as many ways as possible to encourage schools to take part in the training. And we're a bit relentless with it, if I'm honest. It's something that we just have to keep reminding our schools that the offer is there.
Thank you. Zara, do you want to follow up with that at all? I'm going to got something to add to that, but I'm going to come to Dan for a moment because I know he's got a question to add.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 4 questions actually to ask. They're very short, but I'll be quick as I can here. So my first question is, what an appreciative inquiry is? The second, RE.1 on the agenda, Q actions A to Q is 17 actions. Does this mean that 28 recommendations were not brought forward? The report does not explain on this. And my third question is, report RE.7 Q, how many schools proactively engage with an excluded child if it looked after child is differently approached, and if so, why? And my fourth question, RE.10, what is felt to be the reason for substantial 40% uplift in young people with EHCP? Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So I can answer your first one about an appreciative inquiry. So this was conducted by our previous Department for Education advisor, Anthony Douglas. So he looked into what was working well in terms of inclusion across BCP. So schools' approach to inclusion, how many exclusions there were across BCP, policies and things like that. So he was looking at what was working well and wasn't working as well. And from that, he came up with 45 recommendations of how to improve inclusion across BCP. Councillor, but I can send you a copy of it if you haven't seen it already. That was done, I think, in May of 2021. And then just as I joined BCP, we then had in June 2021, we had our SEND inspection. So from that SEND inspection, as you know, we were required to write a written statement of action. So in terms of our SEND service, we now have sort of 2 mandates of change, the appreciative inquiry and the written statement of action. So some of those recommendations that Anthony Douglas made in the appreciative inquiry will be delivered through the written statement of action. So for example, one of the recommendations was setting up a BCP Heads Forum. It was having a pre-exclusions panel. So we are taking a number of those recommendations and making sure we deliver them through the written statement. And so there's a joined up piece of work there. Your second question, can you just repeat that again?
Yes, it was about the actions in point 1, 17 actions. Does this mean that 28 recommendations are not brought forward? The report does not expand on this.
So 45 recommendations from the appreciative inquiry. Oh, do you mean the actions in point 11?
No, point, well, A to Q. 11, sorry.
Yes, so those actions in 11, some of those were recommendations from the appreciative inquiry and some weren't. So I don't know off the top of my head how many of the 45 recommendations are being delivered through the written statement of action, but a number of them are. So those actions in point 11, some of them are recommendations and some of them are just the work that we're doing. Does that make sense, Councillor Butt?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that.
And there was a question on, your last question was about the rise in EHCPs.
Yes, the 40%.
So we, well spotted, we have had a huge rise in EHCP requests for assessments and then subsequently EHCP plans. This has happened nationally as well, so it's not just BCP. So a number of things. The number of EHCP plans have risen since the 2014 reforms, where local authorities, we have more duties, and we have to meet the needs, sort of more complex needs of children with SEND. COVID is thought to have an impact on that. So like Kelly was saying, we're experiencing much more complex SEND, we're experiencing sort of complex mental health difficulties alongside learning difficulties as well. So yeah, a number of factors that sort of nationally is impacting on the number of EHCPs, but we're certainly not the only local authority who's seeing that rise. It's having an impact on the service.
Thank you.
And what was the third question?
There was a third. It was to do with the how do schools proactively engage with an excluded child if looked after child is a differently approached, and if so, why?
Do you want to answer that, Kelly?
It was point 7, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just looking back at point 7.
Head teachers should, as far as possible, avoid excluding with SEN, EHCP or looked after.
So our expectation is that that permanent exclusion is the last resort for all our young people. In terms of any young person with SEND, EHCP, or if there is a child in care, are you asking the difference between a child with an EHCP and a looked after child with an EHCP? Sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so there isn't a huge amount of difference, to be honest. So any child who is looked after, they would also have the support of the virtual school, and myself as the virtual school head, as an additional advocate for them. In terms of a child that isn't looked after and just has the EHCP, the only real difference is they don't have that additional layer. But there would the process would be exactly the same. There wouldn't be a difference in the process of a permanent exclusion.
Okay, thank you.
Are you happy with those? Yeah. Just to add,
Thank you, Chair.
The appreciative inquiry, we did quite a lot of work on that, and it sort of got overtaken by Ofsted. So I'm sure if you get some information, if you want some more,
Yes.
I'll make sure you get it. Yeah, Sandra, was you? Yes, thank you, Sandra.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, my concerns are actually about children who live in the BCP council area but go to school over the border in either Dorset or Hampshire. The policies of these councils aren't the same. They may be similar, but they're not the same. So can I ask whether BCP officers are still able to support these children in the same way as they can in the schools within BCP?
After you, Kelly.
So if a young person is resident in BCP, the inclusion team will work with that family and with that child. Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Sandra? Yeah. Emma, I think you was next.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question about the disproportionate number of permanent exclusions and suspensions amongst students with an EHCP and even those with SEND support compared to no SEND. Obviously, we all know the impact of COVID on everybody, including young people. The students with an EHCP typically have the highest levels of support in school. So why are we seeing such a huge increase? It sounds like from what you said earlier that you know where these permanent exclusions and suspensions are coming from, so you know whether it's primary, secondary, special, alternative provision, and actually the individual schools that this is happening in. But I think my question is, why are we seeing this increase amongst these EHCP and SEND students, given everything in this report saying actually head teachers aren't really supposed to exclude them unless it's the last resort? Is it to do with the behaviour of the students, or is it to do with the tolerance, the ability, the funding that actually schools are getting for these students, or is it being used as a tool for some schools to remove these students off of roll?
I think, but sorry, Kelly, before you come in, just to clarify that we do encourage our schools to make contact before permanent exclusions, and obviously us setting up the pre-exclusion panel hopefully will offer them some support. However, head teachers, they don't have to contact the local authority about permanent exclusions, and they all have the right to exclude for us, you know, a certain number of reasons. So although we do like to get involved and we're encouraging them, sometimes we don't, and we're not involved in them. Ellie, did you want to carry on an answer?
So yeah, just to echo really what Sarah said, that there is nothing that says that a head teacher can't permanently exclude these young people. We are working really closely with our head teachers and our schools to ensure that there is a much better communication, and as Sarah said, that they contact us or our SEND colleagues before it gets to this point. And when I say before, I don't mean the day before, I mean much earlier on. We do need to continue to unpick and understand what it is that our young people are struggling with in schools. And we need to develop ways in which our schools can learn from each other. So we do have some good practice in BCP. We have some really good schools that have an incredible offer for our young people, and we need to bring our schools together so that they start to learn from one another. And I think the Head Teachers Forum will really be the starting point for this, about getting all our head teachers and our MAT leads in a room together and coming together as BCP and working alongside each other and learning from each other. As I say, the increase in permanent exclusions that we see for those young people with EHCPs, there has been an increase across the country. Unfortunately, we have seen a rise in the number of complex behaviours that we see from young people. As I said before, a lot of this is around anxiety and mental health. And we work closely with our health colleagues to ensure that we get the best we possibly can for them. We're all aware of the stretches in within health across the country as well as across Dorset. There was a reduction in permanent exclusions for those with SEND support, if you look at the table, which is encouraging, but I think we are still seeing some of the fallout from COVID as our young people go back into, even a year on, go back into school, go back to a much more rigid learning environment than they have done previously. And some of our young people are really feeling the pressure of that, and we need to find ways to support them.
Do you want to follow that with Emma? No. I know, Danny, I know you've got something, but just before you do, because I just wanted to, Zara, and what Emma said, and I just wanted to follow up because it's something I've been thinking about as well at the same time, because there's a certain tension in schools, I feel, between the two buzz terms, consistency and differentiation. Lots of head teachers say we want consistency of sanctions, consistency of behaviour, and yet all lessons are supposed to be differentiated for their learning. Where one child work may be being very good for them, another child in the same year group, that work may be poor. One child's behaviour in a year may be good for them, where the same behaviour for another child may be poor. Is there a link between, or can we put the link for differentiation within schools to follow on with the same idea?
I think more and more, I think we go back to the point I raised about early identification of need. And it's about ensuring that our schools have the skills within their settings to be able to identify that need and to be able to identify that need early enough, and to be aware of what is out there in terms of support for them. It's too late if we're getting into secondary schools and key stage 4 and only identifying special educational needs at that point. So we need to work with our schools, as I said earlier. So those lead professionals need to be talking to schools, having conversations about that early identification of need.
I mean, I would totally agree. We need to work with our schools. It's it'd be nice to follow what work it is going on. So, Dan, sorry, I interrupted you.
That's okay. It's going back to point 10i, forming a pre-exclusion panel. This is a welcome intervention, but what will it look like? Who will be involved, and what stake would be the youngest person themselves have in the next steps once their matter has been concerned by a pre-exclusions panel? Thank you.
So we've started to look at a pre-exclusion panel. There's actually a number of panels that we need to look at, and one suggestion has been that we bring that pre-exclusion panel together with one or two other panels that the inclusion service would look to have. Interestingly enough, I've been discussing it today with colleagues. So we'd be looking to have representation from social care, early help, health colleagues, schools, alternative education providers, the virtual school, the SEND team, the inclusion team. So it is quite a wide panel. We'd also be looking to, within each individual young person, where necessary, calling in specific professionals to be able to talk around the situation for the young person, possibly a GP, maybe somebody from school. So it really will be a multi-agency panel. We're looking at people from across BCP, so that we can all work together to look at what's best for the young person, but also come together and find solutions, so that school can take those ideas back, put them in place, and therefore hopefully prevent that permanent exclusion. In terms of the young person, that's really crucial. So we do want to be able to hear that young person's voice, and we would be looking for that lead professional to be able to speak with that young person. And where appropriate, it may be that the panel could hear from the young person. That could be in person, as it were, or maybe a written statement. But yeah, we'd certainly be looking to seek the views of the young person, and how that is going to impact on them, as you rightly say, and how they feel the situation is for them.
Thank you for that. Just say, yeah, the multi-agency sounds good there, and the fact of having the actual child be able to either have a statement or speak would be a brilliant idea. Thank you for your response.
Okay, I'm just looking around. I don't think anybody else has got any questions from that. So I'll just do a bit of summing up, see what we've covered quite a lot of ground here. So we've talked about the Academy trusts and how we engage them. We've talked about uniform policy, and we've had a volunteer to get involved in looking at that. Alternative provisions, SEND support, and the number of suspensions, which are more than one in a year. We had a great description of what a navigator is, which is very interesting, and the training of teachers and trauma and attachment. We had a recap of the adaptive appreciative inquiry and the actions from that, and which ones are being followed. We looked at the rise in AHPCs across the country and across BCP. We've looked at engagement with excluded children out from the school, and BCP pupils who go to school across the border. what support they get from exclusions. The increase in number of students with EHPCs. I've written down carrot cake here for some reason. I think was offered it at some point. And the pre-exclusion panel was the. I think that covers everything that we've talked about there. Thank you for that. There's a lot of questions there, and I think we've got a lot of answers. Now, my feeling on this is that I think I would like to see some more data on this in the future. And I'm not thinking necessarily bring it back to committee quickly, but I'm sure you're gathering data all the time. So I think it'd be quite nice to be shared with the committee, so we might have another look and then think about talking about it again in the future.
Yeah, very happy to do that, Chair.
That'd be, yeah, please do.
I was just wondering if MYPs could be included in that as well, just so that it gets to us, those statistics. I think it's quite important.
Yeah, I imagine because the data is not sharing anything that can't be shared publicly, is it? No. Okay, I'm sure that'll be possible. In that case, we'll move on to agenda item 7, which is the SEND mainstream banding. It's page 27 to 52 in our pack. So this item was added to our forward plan back in April so that we can look at its journey to Cabinet. Members of the committee will probably be aware that getting the banding right enables schools to deliver the assistance that SEND pupils require and reduce the reliance on alternative provision. And I believe Rena Mistry, it's an interim head for performance, is going to present the report.
Thank
Rena,
you, Chair.
I think it's your first time at Children's, isn't it?
It is my first time.
I'd like to welcome you, and it's nice to see you.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's a pleasure to be here. So as you've already mentioned, I'm here to provide an overview of the progress to date with regards to SEND mainstream banding. I'm making the assumption that you've all read the review and the paper. So I will just provide a very brief overview of progress to date. So this review contributes to addressing the deficit in the high needs block, and it aims to increase the numbers of children and young people with an EHCP in mainstream schools and reduce the numbers in independent settings. So just a bit of a historical context here, which has led to the review also. So when BCP formed in 2019, it was recognised that savings needed to be made in the high needs block. Therefore, the predecessor authorities that agreed that savings would come from the SEND mainstream top-up funding. This resulted in a 45% reduction in top-up funds provided to mainstream schools. So the reduction in funding has meant that mainstream schools are unable to provide the required and relevant support to children and young people with an EHCP. Consequently, this has contributed to a higher number of children and young people with an EHCP who should and could attend a mainstream school, attending a special school. And this has meant that spaces in special schools are limited for children with more complex needs. So as a result, they attend independent settings, which are costly for BCP. So if we put this into context, so March 22 data showed that BCP children with an EHCP, we had 11.3% of our children with an EHCP attending an independent setting compared to the national average of 5.2%. So in addition to this, as previously mentioned in the previous agenda item, we've had an increase in the number of EHCPs. So we've seen this increase in the last few years, and this increase is forecasted to continue. And again, if we put this into context, BCP, if we compare March 21 to March 22, BCP saw a 14.6% increase in the number of EHCPs. And as mentioned previously, this is not unique to BCP, it's a national issue also. So with increasing EHCP numbers, increasing deficit, and the support that's required by schools, the existing banding descriptors and values have been reviewed. So the revised descriptors have been co-produced with colleagues from BCP, with colleagues from health, school SENCOs and parent carers. So in April 22, these descriptors were piloted with 9 schools, and these schools volunteered to participate. A total of 198 existing EHCPs were reviewed under this pilot. So it was a sample size of 21%, and these existing plans, were the new descriptors were applied, to these existing plans. Now, the outcome of the pilot informed the financial modelling exercise, which informed the proposed 3 banding value options as detailed in the paper. The banding value options have taken teaching assistant hourly rate into consideration, and from the 3 options, the option deemed most viable has been selected, and we are currently consulting on that option. The consultation is a month-long consultation which started on the 27th of June and it ends tomorrow on the 27th of July. So just to summarise the banding values, the existing values range from £1,000 to £5,000, and the proposed values that we are consulting on range from £2,500 to £12,000. So once the consultation ends, we will review the feedback, agree a way forward, and we're anticipating to implement the new banding descriptors and values from November 22 on all new education, health and care plans, and at point of annual review on existing education, health and care plans. Thank you. That's the summary. Open to questions.
Thank you very much for that summary, and you have actually answered a couple of my questions already, which I'm always pleased when that happens. If I can just, I know quite a few members have probably got things to ask you, but if I can just kick off. I was quite surprised at the number of head teachers responding to this. 52 out of 95, and because I do know it has been quite a hot topic, an issue for quite a while. Is there any reason why? I mean, I would have thought that you're going to get near enough 100% head teachers responding to something is fundamental, as important to them as this, because head teachers always focus on money. Well, not always, but you know what I mean. But it's very important to them. So any ideas why we weren't getting more engagement?
Do you want me to come in on that, Rena? I think that there is the consultation that is happening now. So that 52% is about work that Rena did previously. So we are hoping to see a higher response rate in the actual consultation. You're right, head teachers do worry about money. I think also it's just capacity in terms of the time of year that it is that we're asking for them to sort of to respond and to have their ideas. And we do ask a lot from our head teachers in terms of the work that we're doing in SEND. You know, they are heavily involved.
And sort of following on from that, because that sort of takes me into the my second bit, head teachers worrying about money. Because I was looking at the values that you've got here for the different banding levels, and you say you how confident are you that the banding values actually represent the amount of money that it costs to look after a pupil with that banding? Because I know it's slightly more complicated than that, because a school gets a certain amount of money per pupil anyway, and then the banding is extra money to them. And sort of from that, if that child wasn't able to be looked after, catered for within a school, how much would it cost for that child to therefore go to an external provider. You see where I'm going here. I'm coming back to the cake bit again, but in a different form.
So with regards to the banding values, as mentioned in my sort of a brief overview, we did take TA hourly costs into consideration, along with the notional funding, which is £6,000 that each school gets per child. Now, with regards to, under that, we are confident, and based on the descriptors also, that support will be provided and the funding would be sufficient. So in terms of additional costs on top, currently on average for bespoke alternative provision, you're looking at on average about 16,000 per child. So the new bandings, or the bandings that we're consulting on, will hopefully, well, we're anticipating will reduce the spend, if not stop the spend on alternative bespoke packages. Sarah, did you want to add to that by any chance?
No, I think you've covered it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I feel that was covered. I'm just looking around now because I'm sure other people. Emma.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, you've already asked one of my questions, and that was around whether or not, and whilst obviously the bandings are proposed to increase significantly, is that actually enough to achieve, I guess, the seismic shift that we need to achieve in order to reduce that dependence upon those alternative provisions? Because I think we all know the cost of actually supporting these students within mainstream is significant, and schools are struggling with that. I had another question actually, and it just touched on something you said. So at an annual review, are you proposing that a student that's currently in the independent, because obviously we're hugely overrepresented in independent at the moment, it would be proposed that they move out of their independent provision and into mainstream school? And do you see that being a successful initiative with those students?
I'll just come in on that last question, Rena. So at an annual review, provision is always looked at. If a parent wanted a move to a mainstream school, then of course we would look at that. We are not envisaging moving children away from the placements that they are currently in, unless that was something that parents felt would meet their child's needs. So we wouldn't necessarily be looking at that. Rena, did you want to answer the first question?
Could you please repeat the first question? Sorry.
The question was really about the fact that the banding amounts have increased significantly. Do you think that that's enough to actually deliver the change that we need in terms of bringing these students into mainstream provision rather than allowing them to go out into independent and specialist provision? Because it's not always just about the money, and actually this relates also back to the point on the agenda previously around the exclusions of those and suspensions of those EHCP students as well. So is this banding enough, basically?
So this banding will we're anticipating will provide mainstream schools with sufficient funding and support to increase the numbers of children within EHCP within their setting. And as a result, it will hopefully free up space in special schools. So we're anticipating that those young people who currently would like to go to a special school, but unfortunately because due to no spaces are having to go to independent settings, will open up the places for them within special schools. So we are hoping that we will see a shift from young people attending independent schools to increasing numbers in special and mainstream schools through this review.
Thank you. Yeah. Just before you do, Nicola has got her hand up to respond to something. So would you mind if I just gave her the chance to, and then I'll come back to you, Emma?
Thank you, Richard. Am I okay to speak now?
Yes, please do.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to speak. Evening, everyone, and thank you, Emma, for that incredibly pertinent question. Because how long have you got, really, committee and officers alike? Because no, this won't alone achieve the seismic shift. This is one strand of those many things, and actually, you identified a number of them in posing that question. So this is about enabling, making it easier for schools to do what a lot of schools want to do anyway, helping them through by pulling one of the levers, and that's a collective pulling of the lever, not purely the local authority doing it. But this has come about partly at the request of schools themselves. Sarah might want to comment on that, but this is a many-stranded approach. The appreciative inquiry is really a big part of it. Dan, I was put in well, I don't understand your world of computing. This is very much the world of Venn diagrams, if I can put it like that, that we're trying to achieve a lot of things in a lot of different ways, and there is an overlap. And the sweet spot sits really in the middle of that. And that's about making sure that the children and young people are in the right place for them, getting the right support for them, enabling them to grow up in their own community in the very best way for them, achieve that independence, enabling the schools to support them, both through the revenue budget, but also, and I'll speak to this very briefly, although I don't need to actually later on, in terms of any capital investment that we can provide for schools, like some of them are developing resource units, resource centres and so on, so young people can be placed in those schools. So the short answer to will it achieve it on its own? No. Is it part of a bigger package? Absolutely yes, and that's the intention, and that's why it is it's a series of levers that we're looking at. So we're never closed off to any further suggestions, and clearly there's some consultation, and this may require further tweaks. But it's one of those things that we firmly believe is something we need to get in place if we're to achieve what we all set out for. Thank you, Richard, for allowing me.
Thank you. Now I've got a number of people who've got questions, and I know I've got one want to slip in as well, just on what Emma. But you want to follow.
Yeah, I was just going to thank everybody for those responses. That's really reassuring, and just say that it may be worth, as we look at the data going forwards, separating out those new EHCPs against the ones that have been in existence for longer, because hopefully we'll start to identify some improvements sooner by doing this rather than just look at the overall picture. But thank you.
So it's going to be Sandra, then May, but I'm just going to. It's just something which I thought. Did she? Well, it's just. Oh, thank you, mate. That's very kind of you. It was just something that you said. If a pupil who has receiving money for banding is suspended, even if for quite a long time, what happens to that money that the school is receiving then?
For permanent exclusions, then
I was thinking of a temporary exclusion, suspension. I'm thinking, I know we've established that nobody gets 24% of the year suspended, but it could end up with quite a lot of days suspension. Does the money for the banding pause going to the school, or does the school continue to receive that money and therefore, shall we say, choose to spend it elsewhere?
It's a good question. The school, in theory, the school would continue to receive that money unless the child was permanently excluded. But if a child has an EHCP and was excluded and did have suspensions, then we would be supporting with other ways anyway. So we would be looking at what additional support we could put in place. So I'd like to think that wouldn't happen, like a long suspension for a child.
I was just wondering if there's any sort of link between increased suspensions and receiving money for somebody who wasn't in the school. I'm probably being.
It's something we could look at.
I think Sandra was first. Was sure? Okay, that may in that case.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sandra. So one of the questions I had has partially been answered, which was to do with the proposed new banding, and I think that committee are being asked if we would support proposal 2, I guess, which is the one that comes out as the one which is most positive. So it's very stark, the jump between existing banding and what is being proposed, particularly for band D. It's quite a big jump from 5,000 to 14,000. So it's been partially answered because I think, Rena, you said that it includes the hourly rate of a teaching assistant. But I'm just wondering how that number was arrived at. Do we have included in there possibly a specially trained, skilled professional who is able to actually deal with some of the issues that these children may have as like a team supervisor or something, so that rather than then have to go out to get help, you already have it there as part of your core team that could then actually be funded out of the amount of money that's actually been allocated to the school for that particular pupil. And then rather than come back to the second question, the other question I have is on paragraph 10, again the table, consideration number 3, which is to say increase banding and to buy back support from BCP. So the question I have there is because, and in the next paper, I believe it's actually talked about recruitment and retention. So are we as BCP in a position to actually be able to provide that support whilst it's on paper, it looks good. Yes, we in BCP can provide the support, but are we actually resourced sufficiently to actually be able to do that? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor May. Rena, I'll just come in quickly. So on that last bit, we don't have the capacity to support with offering those services to schools, which is why when we came up with a number of options in terms of banding amounts, and then things like, you know, could we ask schools to buy back that support? So it was a number of options that we discussed, and although that would be great if we had those support services, we don't have the capacity to offer that. Historically, Bournemouth, I know Bournemouth had behaviour support services and learning support services, but back all those years ago, schools decided that they would rather have the funding than have the local authority provide those services. So no, the answer to that is we wouldn't have the capacity currently to offer those services. And also to sort of cover your first question, the funding that is given for children for EHCPs, schools need to be very clear on what that is being spent on. We looked at those banding amounts so that they could support the recruitment of a teaching assistant. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what is in the best interest of that child. So if that child needed, for example, play therapy, that could be purchased through that EHCP funding. Did that answer your first question, Councillor May?
Yes, it sort of does, but I think what I would like to perhaps see or suggest, Chair, is that I think if the committee were to support and it is approved by Cabinet, proposed option 2, then I think the plan is to implement it from September, was it? I think, yeah.
November. My apologies. Whether we give it 12 months, and then it'd be quite nice to see, well, that's if some of us are still here, to actually see what progress has been made, given that portfolio holder has said that this is multi-strand, and perhaps in the interim period we might see what these other strands are, of which this, I'm assuming, will be quite a major strand in the journey for the child, so that we can actually reduce the number of exclusions.
I would totally agree with you, May. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, because there are a lot of possibilities here, aren't they? And getting this right is very important. I was very interested to hear the ideas about the buying back, because I had some following on from what you said, and Sandra, I haven't forgotten you. So, because but by schools buying back from the authority, it depends on A, the authority being able to provide, B, the school deciding to choose the authority, because of course it wouldn't have to, would they? That they could decide to spend their money elsewhere, and we'll end up with the same issue of going to external providers and costing more. So I think that is a really good idea. I think that is a recommendation. Or we yeah.
Chair, I leave it up to you, but I do think that because this is really important, that we need to have some sort of monitoring just to see what progress is.
I'm just looking around. I'm not seeing anybody saying that's not a good idea. I'll just give a moment just in case anybody did. In that case, I think that would be a good thing to recommend. Sandra, thank you for waiting.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, obviously, I'm really pleased to see this paper because, as I expect you can, recall a parent rep once came to this committee to raise concerns from parents about the banding system. My question was actually very similar to May's, and you know, the recommendation I can completely support, but I would just tweak it slightly to say that if you know, if things aren't working out quite as expected, you know, and you get the law of unintended consequences come out of this, would you be able to tweak or refine the banding very, very quickly, so nobody is disadvantaged? So it's just a sort of a slight tweak from May's, really.
Now, I just noticed that Sarah, you actually got your hand up before Sandra asked the question, but can we deal with Sandra's question, then come to what you had first next?
Yeah, so Rena, did you want to come in and answer that one, and then I'll...
There was a couple of things I just wanted to mention. So going back to the previous comment around monitoring and the rollout of the revised values, we are actually developing a robust framework. So we will be monitoring the progress of this project and analysing the data, and we will be able to provide an update in a year's time in terms of how well we've progressed and what we have achieved. And with regards to the question, sorry, could you repeat the question? Apologies.
Sandra, that's your question. Is it about tweaking?
It was about tweaking. Yeah. Yeah, just following on from May's recommendation, just tweak it slightly so that you know, so that you can tweak the banding if things aren't working out quite as expected. That was all.
Okay.
So what you're asking is if it isn't going how the schools and authority are expecting,
exactly.
Is there any capacity to
rather than having to do another major review at a later date, just to tweak it so that everything works out. Yeah.
Sarah, could you step in and answer that question, please? Thank you.
We're not anticipating, you know, this is a huge increase from what schools were having before. As you can see, you know, bandies from 5,000 to 12,000. And like you said, Chair, you know, head teachers are concerned about money. So I'm not envisaging that the amounts are going to be an issue. I think, like Councillor Green said, this is one lever that we are using to address the work across the SEND system. So I think the rise in the funding alongside all the other actions in the written statement, and that was the point where I had my hand up, which is Councillor May was saying about bringing that back and making sure that we're monitoring it. So this is one of the elements and one of the actions in the written statement of action. So this lever works with all those other actions that we're putting in place through the delivery of the written statement. So the way that I see it is that schools will get the support with the funding as well as all the other changes that will happen and the transformation of the SEND services.
Does that answer your? I think it was a sort of no, wasn't it?
That was a no.
Yes.
Yeah, it answers my question. I just don't like the answer.
Yeah. So that was a very nice no. I think. Yeah. Dan, I think you were next. And then,
Thank you, Chair. I've got a bit of a preamble and I've got two questions to ask here. So it's clearly stated the lack of resources means that young people with an EHCP may not receive the same opportunities as those without an EHCP. The theme that runs through this report is that since 2019, with a 45% reduction in this specific funding stream, we now have 40% uplift in young peoples with EHCP. My first question is, if this correlation is correct, we are surely charged with an increasing resources for those with EHCPs to reduce them over time. And my second question is, the pre-exclusion panel, if robust, may well be able to reduce further calls on required resources for our young people. What would the portfolio holder agree with this? Would the portfolio holder agree with this? Sorry.
I think that's a question then for you, Nicola, isn't it?
Sorry, Dan, I didn't just quite catch the very last bit prior to, I heard your preamble, but not the first part of the question.
The second question, sorry.
Yes, please, if you could.
Yeah, second question. So the pre-exclusion panel, if robust, may be well be able to reduce further calls on required resources for our young people. Would the portfolio holder agree with this?
Yes, that's one of the pieces of work that's being taken forward through the appreciative inquiry, which is that sort of wraparound piece of work. So yes, another of those actions which will contribute. Do you think it's quite worth just remembering that we're talking about funding which sits within the dedicated schools grant here, so it is a ring-fenced amount of money, and it's also worth mentioning as well that of course how we spend that, well, a lot of recommendations are coming forward through the banding review. That is the schools forum. They are the consultative body, and what they express their wishes about how we spend this money, so that's another piece of context as well.
Okay, Dan, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Nicola.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, Emma, I think you've got another question. Yes.
I do, thank you, Chair. Actually, Sarah, your answer to Sandra's question before was a brilliant lead into my next question. And I think it's really easy for us all to look at that column on the right-hand side and see those big numbers and, appreciate this sort of like, the advantage to the schools with this increased funding. My question is, from the experience of the pilot, how did the head teachers take it when actually that funding is reduced? And if I'm like reading the table under section 18 correctly, there are actually several cases where if you follow the banding that's been proposed here, the schools will actually be getting less under the new banding proposal than they are at the moment. So just as way of example, there's 18 students going from band D, which is currently 5,000, to band 3, which is 4,000. From the pilot, how was that taken within schools?
So the pilot didn't involve any amounts of money. Rena, do you want to just describe what the pilot involved?
So the pilot involved school Senkos and our educational psychologist working together with the new revised descriptors, and they applied the descriptors to existing plans, and they both jointly, well, they individually reviewed the plans against the new and old descriptors to see where actually they would place that child, so which band they would place the child under the old descriptors and the new descriptors, and then they worked collaboratively together. So this was actually an exercise undertaken with both them doing it on their own and together. And at the time of the pilot, as Sarah mentioned, there were no financial information was disclosed because it was the pilot that helped inform the financial modelling. What we do have to realise with the financial modelling as well, it's indicative, and it has been based on the descriptors and the needs that have been identified and reviewed. And where possible, under the option that we're consulting on, we have tried to ensure that even through the movement within the new banding or the proposed banding structure, we've tried to ensure that there isn't significant financial sort of loss or detriment to the school. So all in all, if we look comparing the bandings, the current bandings with the proposed bandings, on average, we've just had we've proposed 107% increase in the values. So yes, we don't anticipate. I mean, we haven't had any further sort of feedback from schools. It was a collaborative exercise, and again, the consultation. We're anticipating some feedback within from the consultation, which we will review when the consultation ends tomorrow.
Would you like to follow that?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good explanation. So does the consultation actually include then examples of where these schools are going to receive less funding for an individual student? Because I would just predict that if a school finds out they're going to get less money for a student that they're already struggling to support, that's not going to be well received.
No, so as I've mentioned, we have tried to do the banding values so there isn't a significant reduction. So if we compare the bands, so under the proposed bands, the lowest band, so band A, which is the new sort of band equivalent band 2, band A is 1,000 and the new equivalent band 2 is 2,500. So even if a child that is on current band B and receiving so 2,300, if they move down to band 2, they will still receive more money than they are on the existing band. Does that help clarify? And all in all, we have undertaken some the modelling against at school level and pupil level and school level, sorry. And all in all schools will see an increase based on the modelling, not a reduction.
So just I'm sort of hearing the questions here. So I think what basically the assurance is needed that no school, no pupil will end up worse off as a result of this, because I think that, sorry, there's a motorbike going past us, that I think that we all hear that there is going to be an increase, and we all hear that this increase is a good thing, and but what we are worried about is there may be some cases that it ends up with a child or a school getting a reduction, not intentional, just purely by the way that the maths work. Am I summing up correctly? What yeah. So it's sort of that insurance, and I've heard exactly what you said, and you've been very assuring about it, but I still feel that there is a worry that it's possible for it to happen. Yeah, not nice way of putting it. Thank you. An unintended consequence.
Can I just come in on that?
I was rather hoping you might, actually.
So we had a really good question as part of the consultation. So we've been responding to the questions as they've come up during the consultation. And one of the questions was something around, if my child gets the top band and the school still need additional support, is there anything else? So we, as for all our children, if a school requested additional support that was over and above that banding, we would always look at it. So if a child is at band 2 and the school say, actually, we need X, Y, and Z, we might ask them for a costed provision map and look at that. So we would always look at those requests as well for that additional funding if it was to meet a certain need.
Are we happy with is he any follow-up to that? Emma, no, okay.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, I'm looking around. Do we have anybody else got any questions on this? Look around the monitor there for. Okay, so just to sum up, because we've had again quite a discussion here. We've looked at the schools. The head teachers responding, the sufficient, whether it's sufficient funding. We've looked at the annual review of mainstream, the increase of the increase in budget from BCP, the number of pupils on EHCP plans and the number, how they're changing. We're looking, particularly worried about the schools, any possibility of getting less funding when this is applied. Now, we said, I think we're happy with option 2, with the caveat that we'd like it reviewing to see how it goes. And I'm looking around, everybody nodding at me. Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, thank you very much. That was again quite a nice long debate. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I was just wondering, I for the committee and for you as well, I've got a bus to catch. I was wondering, and kind of politely wondering, if we could maybe swap our agenda to come before the Children's Services Improvement Plan. That'd be okay.
I think that's probably. I'm just looking at the officers. Would the officers be? Did you hear that the young people's Parliament review input, that they need to leave earlier from the meeting? Would you be happy that went next? So we swapped it round. Is there anybody shouting at me and saying, yeah, okay, right. In that case, we'll move the agenda. Just give me a moment to get my my right page on the my paper. So this is the Members of Youth Parliament update. This is item 9 on the agenda. Really, it's an annual report. This to find out what's going on by the MYPs, and welcome you to present the report.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you for swapping the agenda items around as well. So you all have in detail, kind of roughly in front of you, our campaigns in the report. I think it's pages 59 to 62, if you want a reference. But with the floor, we would like to comment in further detail about our main campaigns and the development that we have made in them in like the last couple of months since our election success in March. We'd be grateful if elected members and service staff could save questions till after our brief overview, no pun intended. And I'll now pass over to my main partner in Youth Parliament crime, Zara Sosic.
As you all know, I'm Zara Sosic, and for those who don't know my main campaign in detail, my current one that I'm working on is an anti-bullying rehabilitory programme centred around individualisation and compiling a board of student representatives and teachers. To give reference to the to give a reference of the programme's validity, it shares similar traits to the St Edward's and Evelyn's approach to anti-bullying, which is in regards to the student-teacher board. But I would be employing a communication between the schools with the board, which is different because then we can figure out what's working and what isn't working. The issue is prevalent, being in 1 in 5 children, and 20 to 30 students frequently are involved in bullying, whether they are the perpetrator or the victim. There have been some policies mentioned in our recent Hull in our Hull meeting, which is our annual conference, and so I'm thinking there could be some collaboration there, but we would need to go more in depth. On to all the people we have made contact with. We've been in contact with 2 organisations based around our campaigns called Sensations and Chatterbox, who are readily available to meet with us and assist in our campaign. We have also met and begun to draft a contact to the wonderful Sarah Rempel, who is with us today, and obviously already knows me, who has useful information to assist in my campaign especially. And finally, with my deputy Hannah, we would be developing pop cards and even provide a way of training to use them to our campaigns. And now back to my fabulous Dylan.
Very sweet of you. So in the last weekend, as Sarah just touched on slightly, we've been in Hull. Yes, I'm aware it's quite north. And we had the pleasure of meeting the NYP for Dorset. Stanley, what was his last name? Was it Bowden, I think? Yeah. Yeah, I think it's NYP. I think he's called Stanley Bowden. Yeah. Dorset NYP, who have like very similar ideas to me in regarding my uniform policy. So non-binary friendly uniform. For some clarification on that, in the BCP area, when I was kind of doing my campaign research across the schools, there wasn't really much ability for non-binary students to feel comfortable in the uniform policies. So non-binary people are people who don't conform with the gender they were assigned at birth. They usually use they them pronouns, but it can be neo pronouns and stuff like that. So recently with my head teacher, we've been developing an idea of like a chop and change system. I feel like that's intensive, but I can't find a better way of putting it. So like students from, no matter if their gender can swap around trousers or skirts, and it wouldn't matter. So it just means that, it provides a safer working environment for their students, and ideally that comes without prejudice from their fellow students. But then hopefully we can also provide ways that schools can adapt and try and help those students that are non-binary and are using different uniforms to say people with he him pronouns or a cisgender. So I'm just moving on here. I've been in contact with counsellors, Kathy Hadley, and the aforementioned wonderful Sarah Rempel in forwarding my campaign regarding a non-binary friendly uniform. And we've had the pleasure of working alongside Becky to help us with the experiences and sometimes windy roads that we've had in the past few months. I would like to finish by saying I hope you all would have looked at ways to support our campaigns. And I would ask if you could keep the 11th of October open in your diaries, if that's all right. As we will be presenting ways counsellors can heighten their interaction with young people. It's something that I was in a meeting with Sarah actually and Councillor Mike White. I was thinking in a similar way to MPs holding political surgeries, how councillors can interact with young people. I think it's and get a gauge for how interested they are in local politics. I think it's so important as a young person myself that's into politics that we give the opportunity to everyone, no matter socio-economic background. I just think it's crucial, and I'm hoping that you guys can help me in that, and other elected members. So yeah, I think that's open to all elected members. Am I right in thinking that, Becky? Yeah, so all elected members on the 11th of October. I mean, as many as we could get would be fantastic. So thank you for your continued support. And do you have any questions for us, lovely people?
Well, I will kick off with an observation and a question. I'm just thinking about how when Sarah fills in forms for now, when it wants Mr., Mrs., Doctor, Councillor, what wonderful it is a box now to fit. Yeah, it needs to change your title. Yeah, the young people and politics is one of my things as well, because getting young people involved in politics to actually, yeah, when young people get to the voting age to actually go and vote, it is a big thing, because the number of young people who vote is actually quite small compared with, and of course it's most important for them. So my question is what can we do to engage? And you've partly answered this already. Turn up on the 11th of October, but is there anything else?
I think Sarah might agree with me on this as well. Is that I think we need to try and work in maybe just basic political education into curriculum. I know it's so difficult, and especially with nationalised curriculums and standardised curriculums, it's so difficult to integrate those different political points in there. But I think if you'll agree with me here, I'm a massive supporter of votes at 16, but also looking at that kind of votes at 18 bit. How do we get that support for young people? I think it's just crucial that we have it in our PSHE lessons. I know that Parkstone, so a deputy member, Annabelle, she goes to Parkstone. She's got a fantastic wellbeing curriculum, and she goes to an all-girls school. I think that needs to be replicated across BCP, and I think that's where that we can maybe integrate those kind of basic fundamentals of politics. Maybe not necessarily party politics, but how you look at policy and how you interpret it. I think it's just so crucial to making sure that we get as many votes as we can in general elections, no matter political persuasion.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm sorry, I'm hogging the questions here slightly, because you've PSHE in schools. By the sounds of things, it's not standardised across schools, and various schools. Some schools are getting a political education within PSHE and so on. Now personally, I would like some feedback from you to know what the variation is, you know, without actually naming schools, because that isn't, just to get some sort of feedback of now, I'm not asking for it now. It would be, no, what I'm asking is far too much to ask you, but it'd be really interesting to hear, you know, in the future. Yeah, and it also means you getting to talk to lots of different schools as well, because that is also yeah, please.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, there's coming from another angle. There's hearing young people's voice in everything that the council does, trying to incorporate young people's views and hearing their lived experience, which could apply to anything, whether it's in children's services or how to use the parks appropriately or where to place things in the community. As well as informing what we do as services and developing what we do, it's also a way of encouraging the young people to understand how to get involved, why to get involved, why there's value in doing it. So it's another introduction into the political arena, coming from a completely different angle. So it's just thinking, I would say a little bit outside the box. There's the formal education side, and then there's so many other ways of considering it. So my thinking about it from the point of view of being a manager participation would be to always asking the question, so how have young people been heard in whatever the discussion is, and if we don't think it's sufficient, how can we make that happen? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to quote a line from a song at this point. It's called "The Summertime Blues." I'd like to help your son, but you're too young to vote. But we know that isn't the case, but I think that's what a lot of young people actually hear, and of course it's not true. But talking to young people, whether at the doorstep or at surgeries or things, it very rarely happens. Does any? I'm looking around the room. Does any councillors here ever get young people turning up to their surgeries at all? No. So it is quite. Yes. Yeah.
They weren't allowed to discuss politics, party politics, but they wanted to know where I was. So they were sort of describing a spectrum. Where would I appear on that spectrum? I mean, they were doing everything to get around what the teacher wanted them to do, but they were really, really good. Yeah. And when you've been interrogated by young people, you've really been through it. Trust me.
Yeah, I mean, adding to, I know I've done the same, but because it depends on you being invited to a school, and the idea of what is politics, I think a lot of people, because party politics, but as soon as anybody's making a decision about somebody else's life, that is politics. It might not be party politics, but it is politics.
Yeah, just to comment on that as well, it's so crucial that you as elected members help get, you know, children interested in it as well. I was so lucky that I was given this opportunity, so lucky. And do you know what? Apart from going to a couple of BCP council meetings in my local area, I never really had anything to do with BCP. And I've got such a fantastic education from it. But I do think that every student in BCP deserves that education. And I don't think I'll rest for my term, until I get to a place where I'm happy with it.
Zara, do you want to add to that?
As most people know, I was elected from Bournemouth, but the area from Bournemouth I come from is a low-income area with especially high rates of things like disorders, like learning difficulties and things. And when it comes to things like politics, it's most commonly demonized in my area, and it's also not understood. And I will admit, I knew little to nothing before I started doing this. And I have found that politics isn't what I thought it was, and you can genuinely help people, and it isn't what you hear. And the lack of education, especially in areas where it is needed most, is where the issue comes from, because we need to start hearing the voices of these areas, and we can't help these areas without them understanding what's going on, which is one of the issues. We have such low-income areas with such big issues, like things like county lines, and I think by educating people, we can directly fight this issue, and it is just horrible. But that is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be the voice of these areas. And I think by doing things like educating people, having MPs go and talk to the students, and just starting to communicate this in PSAG, we can start to fix things. And that is why this is so important.
But Yeah, Lisa, would you like to ask a question?
Thanks, Richard. I just want to say how encouraging it is to have Dylan and Zara saying all this, because I've been thinking this for a long time, and I know when I'm going around canvassing, it's just so sad that so few people know anything about how local government is run. You know, a lot of people, oh, politicians are all the same, and it's nothing to do with me. And so I think if you can sort of be educated right from the start in schools, it's brilliant. And you know, just trying to get everybody involved um, and we've been asked actually to go into St. Peter's. We had the MP going in, so just to create a balance, one of us 3 Labour councillors were asked to go in. Um, so you know that's encouraging too. And I know when I was working at BSG, a lot of the politics students there would come and have a chat to me, and that was quite encouraging as well. So yeah, it's brilliant what you're doing, and I'm totally behind it. And anything I can do to help, do ask.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Richard.
Dan.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say, with regards to engagement with the Youth Parliament, we do have a lead engagement role, which is my mother, Councillor Mrs. Judy Butt. She was the one that got me involved in politics. I've been brought up with it from the age of 3, unfortunately. So, and in my own schools, you know, politics and getting involved with that sort of thing was a big thing, and getting involved with communities. So I see it as a big thing. I think you need to speak to Councillor Jude's Butt as in regards engagement. I think that would be very helpful to you and help with your projects. Councillor Jude's Butt, BUTT. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Sandra, yes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was just going to add to what I said earlier. I know that you invite all the schools to take part in the NYP elections, but not all the schools participate, and sometimes it might be better or helpful if you were to actually, you know, talk to the young people directly, if that was possible, from the different schools, because some of the youngsters that I've spoken to, they didn't know anything at all about the NYP elections, and I told them that, you know, you came here and you came to meetings and you contributed, and they were totally amazed, and they thought, wow, how are we going to do this? So I said, well, I'll tell your teacher, which of course I did, but they really didn't know, but they were interested when they did know. Yeah.
It would be interesting actually to see whether the PSHE that was talking about earlier on does marry together with what schools get involved with, isn't it? So yeah, Zara.
I'd like to add on to what you said, and it is so true. Obviously, I'd never heard anything about being in NYP before I was told by, believe it or not, my debate club, which is a completely random thing, but I was relatively good at debating. She was like, we have an NYP vote coming up, and that's how I got into it. But before that, I had nothing on it, especially coming from an area that I come from. Having this kind of title is really great, but there is little to no education on it. Like in my school, I've been told this is a direct quote, you do NAF. Now NAF means nothing. So I've had to explain to a lot of people what I do, and even then a lot of people don't believe me, and you have to genuinely show them what you're doing before you get any sense of recognition. But I do honestly, this is one of the roles that are so important because of the voice. Like we said, things like this, they aren't talked about because they aren't known. Like we don't purposefully miss out things in our PSHE. They just, people aren't aware that it's not the same curriculum in each school. It's all, it just needs to be worked on. And without student and youth voice, we can't get anywhere that's helping the youth voice. And this role can seriously help that, especially from all areas, because we don't want it to be one area is better than the other area. We don't want more representatives from certain, yeah, And it is honestly, we've heard from different schools that they've obviously already known about it, they've run each time, and then there are schools that, like you said, have not even voted or haven't even heard about the opportunity and have completely missed out on even being a part of the election, which is heartbreaking. But this is why we need this kind of awareness, and we are going to slowly get there, but until we do, we can never fully say that everyone's getting equal opportunity.
Thank you, May. I know that you've got a breath, yeah. Did he? Sorry, but Eddie, you have to wave at me a little bit more.
All right.
So Eddie, then May, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, it's really following on from Daniel, and it's perhaps getting into some of the what are called youth organisations as well as the schools, because we work closely with 2 or 3 youth organisations within our patch, and getting them funding from our CIL or wherever funding they can, or helping them through Sport for England and stuff, and getting them support and going in and talking to them, and they didn't realise what support we can give as a local authority or pointing them in the right direction. And that also is getting them on what I call the ladder to see what the local authority, what the councils and what the politicians can do.
Yeah.
So, it's an all round thing. Thank you.
Yeah, no, so it's a really good point to raise as well. Yeah, so in that, it's nice to have that feedback as well, so that on that 11th of October date, I could maybe integrate a bit of that into it as well. Am I going through the mic? Or am I going into it? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, cheers for that. Thank you. Yeah.
Give us a call.
Yeah, thank you.
May.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to partly echo what Lisa has said about how encouraging this is to actually receive this report. So I just wanted to look at the 5 campaigns that you've actually decided to run. I think they're really, really good. So I think just coming back to the initial point that was raised, which was, well, how do we engage? We want young people to exercise their democratic right and go and vote, whichever party they feel they are most aligned with. But I think there is something in these campaigns that you've selected because they are all relevant to people in your age group, or whether you know someone who's experiencing some of these issues. So that's why you've picked them. And I think a good way to try and get more people involved is to say we've got these campaigns and we have some success from them, to say if we hadn't done this, so and so or this group of people wouldn't have been helped. And I think somehow it's about, as a few other people have said, it's about, well, why do you want to become a councillor? You become a councillor because you want to make a difference. And if the difference is just to a small group of people, to them it matters. To them it's made a positive impact. And I think in exactly the similar way to your 5 campaigns there, you are doing this because you want to make a difference to someone or a group of people's lives. And I think that's quite in itself quite powerful, to say if we hadn't done this, you might have had to suffer in silence, but because we did, we've highlighted the issue, help has been given, or that we've actually made a positive difference, and so therefore there's now a way forward for you. And I think that's actually quite a positive message. But I think it's better coming from yourselves, because sometimes it's a bit like this parent-child relationship. If a parent were to say to the child, they go, oh yeah, mum or dad, that's not cool, or whatever. I don't have children, so I don't know, so I'm kind of just making this up as I go along. But I think if the message comes directly from yourselves, that would be a lot more powerful. But on that, I also noticed that on your campaign C, which is equalities for minorities, that again is a really good one, but you've not identified as yet a lead, or perhaps you're still kind of working on it.
Just to comment,
Thank you, Chair.
That's the deputy member Hallam After's campaign. Do we have any? I think we're working on it.
We have some contacts and
yeah,
certain things that we have to bring up.
Yeah, speak.
So I've been working closely with Hala on this because she's very passionate about it, and it is obviously a huge thing to tackle because, as we know, things like cultural holidays are a prevalent issue, but then we also have things like hair colours, haircuts, food, all these kind of things, and the lack of education just in general in school systems. So with Hala's campaign, because it is such a large thing to tackle at the moment, we're working on figuring out where we want to start. We've already started getting contact with people when we've been in meetings, and it is largely supported, and it is a very, very, very important campaign. Like, we physically can't stress that enough, but where it is so large, we're having to break it down and figuring out where we want to start. And at the moment, I think we're starting with like the cultural holidays, because obviously we have things like what's the thing? Oh, that's the one, sorry. Things like Ramadan can greatly affect schooling, which is because they can't eat at certain times, and then because of that, it does affect their education. And this is a serious cultural thing; they can't skip it. And there is a lack of education in schools. So this is just one example of one religion, and we're trying to integrate that into the school system, whether it's through PSHE, tutor times, just presentations in general. That is why her campaign is so important, because it's not spoken about at all. And honestly, we love Hala, so this is why, yeah.
I know Mike's has had his hand up a little while, so I'm just going to go. If you, is it
It's
follow
just
up?
very, very quick, just a follow on from what.
Because he looked at me
yeah,
like that, I'll let you go.
Zara. Mike will let me off, I'm sure. It's just in response to what Zara has just said. But I didn't actually grow up in this country. I grew up in the Far East. In fact, I actually grew up in a Muslim country, although I'm not Muslim. So on that campaign C, if Hala would like to get in touch with me, I'd be very interested to help her in any way I can. That's all I wanted to say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for saying it, mate. Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. It was just another very quick plug for this all-member seminar on the 11th of October. We're working with our MYPs on this. It's to do with youth engagement, and we've actually taken the liberty already of putting it in all members' diaries. So if you see a seminar there, that's what it's all about, and you'll hear a bit more about it as we get nearer the time. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much for that.
I couldn't make a word.
It was. Yeah, basically it'll be coming up in your. I will repeat what was said sort of there. It's going to be in the diaries, and Mike was plugging it, basically.
Oh, thanks, Mike. You're my main plug. Thank you. Yeah. Cheers.
Susan.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, when Councillor Coote mentioned about monies and LIF, do you remember? More Down St John's Junior School actually hired a coach and had a group of children who had a Prime Minister and then various groups. It was of no party because we're working here cross party. You've mentioned faiths, all sorts. Everybody can work together. It doesn't matter what party you belong to. It's making that difference that's important. And I can hear that that's what you want to do. And I think the heads of schools are very with you on all of that. And there's a young lady called Linda Ford Horn who actually does multicultural visits to school children, taking that around. So what you are, have you met Linda Ford Horn? Are you aware of her? Anyway, in the meantime, I think your approach needs to be multi, cross-party, making a difference, and even a trip up to Parliament if the MP could arrange that for some interested parties. And I can see Councillor Cooper is nodding his head. I think you would be absolutely blown over, because I was. Yes.
Okay, I'll just come back to you. Yes, just and I'll sum up when you've had your last bit. No. Okay, in that case, I will sum up, and then you can shoot. I mean, I must admit, I haven't written many notes here for my summing up, but the one thing I've written down here is 11th of October. We've mentioned that a few times. We've talked about engagement of young people, and not all schools getting involved in how we can do that, and what you're doing to encourage that, and what we can do to encourage that. We've talked a bit about the 5 campaigns and who's responsible for them. I'm just going to end with a little bit of advice to you, because it's something which I had to learn myself. When you do a campaign, take any little successes as a victory, because sometimes things take a long time. And when I think I'm speaking here for all councillors, you spend sometimes a long time, months go by before you get even a small success. Yeah, this is like here. So as soon as you make a difference to one person's life, chalk it up as a success, and then move on to your next one. If just, are you going to leave now? Is it? Doris Day?
Okay.
Okay.
You need to continue on. I'm free to answer any questions.
Right. Okay. Well, I've just paused a minute so that you can leave, and then we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Okay, everybody. Just remind you, we are still live, so we need to move on. We don't want we don't do the echo to watch us rabble, do we? You know, it's sort of no. We've got to be nice and professional about this. So we are coming back now to yes, Zara is a member of the committee, is a co-opted member anyway. So we're going to go to agenda item 8, which is the Children's Services Improvement Plan, Workforce Stability, Resources Management. This is page 53 to 58 on our papers. So this is a recurring item following on from the Ofsted visit. The item's theme is workforce stability. Some discussion about this in the Ofsted monitoring visit briefing that we had recently. I'd like to welcome, I believe it's Joe Parby, HR business partner, who's going to present the report. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. And I'm Jo Pavey, HR Business Partner, and I support Children's Services. I'm here to take you through the workforce stability paper. I'll take the paper as read, but we'll obviously draw out the key points for you. Rachel Gravitt, who is the Director of Quality, Performance Improvement and Governance, is also present, and we've jointly prepared this paper together, and we'll be able to answer any questions that you might have at the end. So as the HR business partner for Children's Services, I'm supporting the senior leadership team with the workforce elements of the Ofsted improvement plan. And workforce stability is obviously one of the #1 priorities of the service in order to move forward with the improvement journey. As you'll be aware, there is a national shortage of social workers. And the inadequate Ofsted rating means that BCP is experiencing difficulty in attracting, recruiting and retaining skilled social work professionals in particular. This has led to a reliance on agency staff across the service, with the poorest performing teams being staffed by the highest proportion of agency staff. Turnover of social work positions is also the highest in BCP compared with our neighbouring authorities and national averages. As detailed in the report, pay levels are also an issue, and in HR we are supporting the service to explore what actions can be taken to ensure that BCP is competitive in the market and therefore more able to attract and retain talent. The paper details the steps which have been taken so far to support the improvement journey. So progress so far includes the establishment of a stable senior leadership team under Kathy Hadley, and senior leaders are currently working on creating permanent staffing structures to ensure there is resilience and adequate resource within those teams in order to support the improvement journey and future-proof the services. There is also a staff progress forum, which was already established within Children's Services, and that is run and led by members of staff alongside their day jobs. So they're incredibly valuable. And this forum has proved to be very successful to date, and it's key for clear and consistent communication, which then impacts upon staff engagement in a positive way. So that progress forum is due to be relaunched to ensure that we have representation from across the service, and this forum will be a key platform to communicate, engage with staff going forward. The report also details the point that due to different HR and payroll systems that we have in place following LGR, it's necessary for things such as manual calculations for data such as staff turnover to be carried out. We're working closely with the IT and employee first team to see how reporting could be further developed for greater accuracy and greater use of reporting. Going forward, there is also going to be a focus on wellbeing and sickness absence data across the directorate, and I'll be working with HR colleagues to support the service and management teams to appropriately manage sickness absence, both short and long term, and support the health and wellbeing of our BCP staff. Hopefully that provides a useful summary of the report itself. If there are any questions, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there's going to be quite a number of questions on this. If as is my want, I'll just start off. Just looking from the top down, as it were, because you talk about stability, and I'm thinking about stability of the senior leadership team. Now, I was on a conference a number of months back, and I was surprised at how short a time, the average time for Director of Children's Services in post is. Going by memory, the average is only something like 18 months, which I was quite surprised about. Now, so we've got the Director of Children's, who is permanent now, and we have quite a senior leadership team in place now. What would a good stability look like? How long are we expecting people to stay? I'm not asking you to say I'm guarantee I'm going to be here for. That's not what I'm asking. But if Ofsted come and look at the senior leadership team, for them to say it is stable, how much turnaround would there be for them still to be happy that it would be stable?
Rachel, shall I hand over to you for that one?
I think we've got, like you said, we've got permanently recruited senior leaders in position now. They are all appointed with the hope that they will be permanent and staying here for a longer period of time. And everybody who I work with is committed to seeing children's services through this improvement journey and beyond. So no promises, but everybody sat around that table is very enthused, very engaged, and very committed to BCP to take it forward through the improvement journey.
Yeah, as I've said, I wasn't really wanting people to commit to stay that there. What I'm thinking about is looking at through the lens of Ofsted. What we all expect in part of career and life, people to move on in jobs, and we expect it to happen. And it's quite right that there is a movement in staff. Well, what I'm thinking is, if an Ofsted inspector comes and looks, at what point do they go that is stable, or more worryingly, at what point do they go that isn't stable?
Okay, so I think at the most recent monitoring visit, especially when I spoke to the inspectors, they were very pleased with the fact that we had permanent leadership in post. So I think they're very encouraged by the permanency, and as they attend the monitoring visits as we go through our improvement journey, and we're all still here and we're all still there making the improvements they want to see, they will support that as a stable workforce going forward. We've got just to add to that as well. We've got all of our service manager posts bar one recruited too as well. So it's not only the senior leadership team now; it's all service manager posts on that tier that are recruited to bar one, which was interviewed for on Monday. So we're being very successful with that. And then obviously the next concentration is the team manager leadership team. So when we get all of that in place, that will be a success. And that's part of making BCP an employer of choice for all of these social workers out there that might want to come and support us on our journey.
So the queue will form. Lisa, I think did you indicate?
Thank you. I've got three questions, so I'll just say all three and then then you can take as long as you need. I wondered, with the staff turnover rate, do you know sort of monthly, is that improving or is that still high? The second question I had is about I think it's maybe an MA training scheme that we heard about a few months ago. What are the conditions for those as they come to finish that year? I think it is. Do they have? Do they come and then carry on with us? What responsibilities are they either way with that relationship into the future? And of course, because I said I've got three things, I've forgotten the third.
Well, it's always better. We'll go with the two, and then we can come back to the third one when you're at Brenner.
I'll address the MA one first. So we have got our what we refer to as our grow your own sort of workforce development strategy, where we support people, social workers, to become apprenticeships to work with us on apprenticeships, or like you say, through the MA support. They will be in jobs and they will have jobs with us after that year has finished. So they are already committed BCP employees at that particular point. I can provide you with the details outside of this meeting to show you how all of that operates, because it would be interesting for you to see the bigger scheme of our Grow Your Own and how we're working to support the development of our staff going forward in order to retain them.
Great, that's good to hear. Yeah.
Can you ask me the first question again, please?
The other one was about the staff turnover rate, and so it says 36, but is that, do you know, have you got enough data to know monthly if that's improving?
Yeah, so we do calculate the staff turnover rate on a monthly basis and keep track of that. We are through the recruitment program that we've got in place and the recruitment and retention strategy that we're developing, improving our the recruitment of permanent social workers all the way through children's social care. So we're making small improvements each month. It's a much bigger picture than just sort of employing social workers each and every sort of minute of the day type thing, where it's about tackling the recruitment and retention strategy that we've got so that we can retain them and keep them as we move forward. So the work that Jo has referred to in the paper that we're doing corporately with HR to look at the conditions of what it's like to work for BCP. For example, 9-day fortnights. We're looking at our pay rates compared to other local authorities that people in this area might want to go and work for. So it's the whole environment. It's not just pay that people want to do a social work job for. They come for a lot of other reasons as well.
And I've just thought of what my other question was, which was if a social worker leaves or goes on sick leave, is that adequately communicated to the young person that they're supporting, do you think?
Yeah, if we have a social worker decide to leave us, they usually have to give us a month's notice. So we've got time, and part of the team manager's role is then to reallocate that work, and there would be a handover meeting with that social worker for that young person wherever possible, so that there was a smooth transition for the young person to get to know that new person. If somebody goes off sick, obviously that's a little bit different. Depending on how long they're off sick for, it would be covered by the duty worker if it was short-term sick. But if we know that somebody's going to be off a lot longer, again, that would be reallocated.
Do you think that's always happening at the moment?
I can't hand on heart say it always happens, but it's a standard that we absolutely aspire to meet and work with our social workers and team managers in order to adhere to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know Sandra, but if I may, I'm just going to follow on with the question because it's just following on the same to say what Lisa has just been asking about, because I noticed two things. It is that the HR payroll systems, they're not the same across all the authority, are they? Which must be making your life difficult to track all this, because it says it in the report, and if it says it in the report, I know it's probably even more difficult than it says. Do you know when this is going to be sorted so that it does make your life easier, so you can track it by just sitting at one computer and pressing one button rather than
Yes.
what's going on at
Yes.
the moment?
And we're looking forward to that time for sure. Obviously, in terms of the transformation journey, we in HR are currently looking at what new systems we will have in place to support that digitalisation of the entire service. So it's hoped that obviously through that programme, our new services will be in place, which will bring. Well, yeah, we've currently got certainly 2, if not 3 systems that we're working off of. So it is quite difficult to pull all of that data together. Nonetheless, we do have data that we can work off of, but it's very much in line with that transformation programme at the moment, which obviously is going to be kind of within the next year. But ultimately, we are working with IT and the Employee First team to see what workarounds we can do in the meantime, so that we can create that consistent and accurate data as far as possible at the moment.
I mean, I would encourage push as hard as you can, because it's making your life difficult. And just following with the same thing, just looking at the data of the turnover, I noticed Southampton was only 5% turnover. Well, now I can see Dorset has got quite a low percentage turnover, and I know why, because they're a good or outstanding authority, and other ones. Southampton, I don't want no disrespect to Southampton, isn't a good or outstanding authority. How come that an authority which has got probably, I'm guessing, some of the similar problems that we've got, how come that they are not getting a bigger turnover? And has anybody talked to them to see what the secret is?
I think it's also how we record the information and provide that information, and which groups of staff that we're counting. So it's not always we're not always comparing like for like in some of those figures. But yes, we have been talking to Southampton with regards to and all of our neighbouring local authorities with regards to the paper that Joe and I have been putting forward corporately to try and support our recruitment and retention strategy.
Just following on, because I can hear the mutterings in the room that you probably, because I think the worry is I understand your answer there, but if it is because of the recording method, it sort of means that the data is slightly pointless, isn't it? If you're saying this is the percentage, and yet Southampton are recording it a different way. I don't put you on the spot here, because
I don't know that for sure,
but question. It's just me looking at the data and thinking, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Sandra.
Yeah, if I could just comment on the pay review. I'm pleased that a paper's been submitted to the Corporate Management Board. And I'm pleased now that you're trying to do something about the pay structure, because obviously I know social workers don't just work for money, but it does help. Having staff doing the same job but on different rates of pay is actually a recipe for causing problems. And the same principle applies to the different IT systems. Now, I know that you were meant to be waiting for the transformation process and doing it as a for staff as a whole across the council, but given the situation in children's services, the sooner that something can be done, the better, because quite honestly, it's really, really difficult for staff. But you know that, and I know you're trying, and it is a really difficult situation. Thank you, Chair.
What was the sort of question there? Was it Yeah, I'm just.
It was more of a you know, an
Observation.
observation and you know, and I know they're trying, and I hope that anything that goes to the corporate management board is successful because the staff need it.
So it wasn't. Would anybody like to respond to that observation, shall we say? I'm hearing no. It was an observation, and yeah. I tell you what, we'll come to May, because I know you've got a question.
Thank you, Chair. So just kind of picking up on the pay review, but I've got a slightly different slant to it. I understand, and I know, Joe, in your presentation, you said that part of it was because our rates were probably not competitive, and hence we're not attracting the caliber of staff or candidates that we would like. But I guess when I read that, I was thinking, well, has this got wider impact for other service directorates? If we're doing a pay review within children's services, would other service directorates say, well, hang on, how about us? That's one question. And then the other one was about the actual recruitment, because I know in one of our previous meetings, we were advised that you were recruiting from abroad, and whether that was still the case, and whether you are also now actively recruiting within the UK. And then my last question, this is again, is a clarification for me in, where is it, page 55, under areas of concern, that paragraph, Roman numeral I, the last bit, it says, there are 42 agency staff who are over establishment to meet increased demand. I have not heard of the phrase over establishment before, but just wondering whether someone can explain to me what that means. That's it, Chair. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor May. Would you and chip in as well? So in answer to the first question, Councillor May, as you say, what about us in terms of other directorates? Yes, absolutely. We need to consider those implications corporately. So that paper has gone to Corporate Management Board. There's some further information that's currently been put together with a view of that paper going back for further consideration. I think that there is absolutely that understanding that given where children's services are, it might be that something needs to be done at this point in order to support that improvement journey and support that recruitment and retention of those social work professionals. I don't know if you've got anything else to add to that particular one, Rachel. No. In terms of recruiting from abroad, yes, we did go through a process of getting some applicants from South Africa. That we're expecting another 2 to join before the end of the year. It has been broadly successful, but nonetheless there has been a review done on that, and there are some lessons learned from that as well that we'll absolutely be taking forward. So our focus for now is to recruit nationally within the UK. That is the prime focus for now. We have rolling adverts that are always out there, and we're looking to do targeted recruitment campaigns for those particularly hard to recruit to roles as well, to really target those people that we want to be attracting. In terms of over-establishment, what that means is, and Rachel will come in as well, essentially there are a number of, within every directorate, there are a number of posts which are approved and budgeted for. And that goes to what, in terms of pay and reward and what our structures are going to look like, then we call it an established post. So when we're saying over-establishment here, it means that we don't actually have those posts in our future structure, which means that obviously has an implication for current staffing structures, but also budgets and finances as well.
And they're usually posts where we're covering for vacancies, or there's been additional demand as there has been through COVID, and for example, a continue of a rise in referrals and that type of thing. So they help us manage that additional demand too.
Mate, do you want to follow that one up? Because I'm just letting that last thing sink in.
The over-establishment. So I guess because those posts are not in the future structure, it does beg the question, does that mean we are going to be under-resourced? But I guess that's
No, we're for the areas of progress, if you see the report, we've got the children's social care structure under point 2, and we're continuing to work on a robust structure that will take us through our improvement journey and into the future. So when we talk about the 42 agency staff over establishment at the moment, that's on the current structure, but we're doing work with the service directors and the teams on the caseload and capacity that's needed across the service.
That gives me a little bit more assurance, but I guess then I just have one comment, which is the pay review and the impact on other service directorates. I guess the comment I would make is that obviously our staff all do a good job, doesn't matter which service directorate they work in, and I just think that they ought to all be treated fairly and there should be equality and parity. That's all, and I think that, yeah, it's a difficult situation we face, but it's a comment more than anything else.
It would, I know this isn't the remit of this committee, but it would be interesting to know if there are any service directorates where we have a surplus of staff. You know, we could find that we've got, for instance, planning officers, you know, 10 a penny, but I'm just guessing, maybe not. I'm just thinking about the agency staff, where the agency staff are, because now when we had our input for the Ofsted monitoring visit, there was the discussion about the number of agency staff in the front door service. I got a feeling that many councils took away that was the standard across the whole of children's service, that proportion of agency staff, and I have a feeling it isn't the case. My feeling is that the front door is where the most agency staff are working at the moment. So are there any areas, what areas are the lower proportion of agency staff?
So in the children and care teams, we've got 100% permanent staff. So it's definitely just at the front door. They're hard jobs at the front door in the assessment team, and they are notoriously difficult to recruit to, not just in BCP but nationally. So it's not unusual to see that, and we have more permanent staff in the children and care teams who work longer term with children and young people, or in the fostering teams or adoption services.
And am I therefore right in saying that there's never movement between the teams? Do you tend to specialise in an area, or can there be any encouragement?
Yeah.
Coming back to our carrot cake again, to move from one area to another.
Yeah. No, staff do, and especially if they're looking for, if they're sort of ambitious and have got aspirations to move on into management posts. We also have grade progression within our learning and development structure. So yes, staff very much do have the opportunity to get experience in different teams, to apply for jobs in different teams, or to move to different areas to gain the experience that they need, maybe to move on, or just because they've worked in a team for a long time and they would like a change.
Thank you for that answer. Zara, was it? Did you want to ask a question? Yeah?
No, sorry.
Okay, right. Yes. Well, thank you for attending and all your input. Can I ask, are there any other questions on this particular item? No. You think we know what's going? So just to summarise, then, we've talked about stability right away from the top, through the whole service, from the senior management team and the managerial posts. We've looked at the monthly turnover rate for staff and the difficulties with the systems of monitoring that. We've looked at the social workers being trained in-house to grow your own and whether they are going to stay with us. We've talked about pay grades across BCP and pay review and how important getting that right and going is. We've also talked, which is a new thing for this committee, other directorates, and whether what we do in children's would affect them and their. We just need to be quiet, don't we? Not let them know, because the money needs to come to children's, but I don't mean it that. We now have the over establishment. We know what it means. Was it? Yeah, I know. Yes. I think that's covered, isn't it? So we've done item 9. We're now on to the portfolio holders update, if we do have any. I'll go to Mike first, just because you.
No, thank you, Chair. Nothing from me.
Thank you very much, Nicola.
Thank you, Chairman. Just mindful of the time, but also the context of the debate. When you've looked at a whole range of aspects this evening, which are really impacting on our improvement journey, but specifically around inclusion. Just a bit of an update. I mentioned in response to Emma's question that we obviously look to use our capital resources to make sure that schools are have the right hardware, the right classrooms and so on, to provide the right facilities for our young people. And obviously we've got some ongoing work in some particular schools, which I hope to be bringing forward to Cabinet very shortly. And those are really, really welcome. But there has been a recent opportunity that the government have brought forward to bid for a further round of free schools, which are special schools. You will not be surprised that we don't want to be at the back of the queue for that, that we're putting forward all the bids that we can for government money. So this would be something a bit different. It wouldn't be a local authority managed build in the way that we normally deal with our own capital, but it would be similar to the sort of thing which has happened at Oak Academy. You may be aware of that. That's a government direct capital investment scheme, and we will be doing everything we can to say, do come and bring your money to BCP. We'd love to have you. We don't expect an imminent answer, and it will be iterative should it even be positive, but obviously I'll keep you updated.
Right, thank you very much for that input, and yes, please do keep us updated. It sounds interesting. So onto the forward plan. Are there any comments on the forward plan at all? Sandra.
The review of youth services. I thought it was going to be coming to Cabinet in September, and presumably we want to scrutinise it before it goes to Cabinet, but it's not on the forward plan. I just want the right months, because I know it's changed a bit since it was first announced. So hopefully somebody can let me know.
Advice from Mike. I was rather hoping you might chip in at this
point. I don't think it's going to be September. I think we were relying on getting the new permanent management team in place, and we've only just got that. So I think probably at least another couple of months, because I think it's important that the new management, the new manager in the area and the management team generally get a proper chance to buy into this before we launch it.
Right. In that case, can we make sure that it's on our unallocated bit at the bottom, so that it gets tagged in on the right place on the forward plan? And any other comments on the forward plan? No. In that case, the next meeting date, if we're all happy, which I know we will be, is the 20th of September. At the other end of the summer holidays, it'll be getting to the autumn then. And in that case, I will declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.